It was subdued city camo instead of multicam forest camo, but at night nobody would notice. I never got around to being able to afford multiple camo patterns of shimongs, unfortunately. A shimong was like a giant scarf that gained popularity in the multiple Middle East wars. The military contractors wore the shimongs a lot there, then everyone in the West decided they were a great idea for tons of uses, so they stuck. I wore mine to cover my neck, like I had with a neckerchief back in Boy Scouts. This one was bigger, though, and fluffier, and kept me warm and protected through many cold ops in the past. I dug out my snow hat next. Inside it were my mechanics gloves. They weren't the warmest thing on the planet, but they kept my hands just barely warm enough. The gloves also prevented direct exposure to the elements. I put the gloves on, then took my contractor cap off and put my snow hat on. Then to top it off, I pulled my hoodie over my head and cinched down the cords. I warmed up considerably. I would still lose a lot of heat from my legs, but this was a significantly marked improvement. The snow hat was special to me because I'd been wearing it since my teenage years. It was oversized to be stylistically cool looking for the period it was released, but served an additional function of actually being able to pull the hat down fully over my ears. It was stupid, but many snow hats never even fit my head properly to cover my ears. The portion of the hat that covered my ears was also folded back up, so it was a double layer. This kept my ears very toasty. It was also the most comfortable hat I had ever worn, surviving trips on local mountains overnight in the winter. Other hats were itchy or loose or didn't cover my ears at all. This hat was the perfection of all hat worlds, and even had a cool logo on it. My favorite fighting game for the time, embroidered boldly in red. They eventually made chic knockoffs of the hat over 20 years later, but I had an original. After getting as winterized as I could, I went to look around and see what everyone else was doing. Everyone else was getting winterized as well, or helping with the fire. A few guys had already been sent with some food down the logging trail to be the west outpost. I decided to put my Kevlar gloves on over my mechanics gloves and started helping gather wood. We would need a lot of wood to get us through the night. I gathered wood for a while, careful not to twist my ankle. Getting wood at night was dangerous, but sometimes had to be done. I heard some forest animals as I walked about. We weren't really here to hunt, but I could imagine someone taking out a deer if they actually could. We were in the right spot for that after all. Originally, everyone thought that the animal population would immediately get exhausted from the surge of hunting that would happen. It didn't happen, though, because the city-states stayed bottled up for so long, waiting for someone to come save them. The wild animal population was alive and well, and would be for quite some time. I brought my first bundle of sticks and branches back to the camp, and a couple of the guys were chopping them down to a manageable size for the pile or to make a shelter. I asked if there was any specific sizes they wanted, but they shrugged. I went out to get more. I stumbled off for a bit, using my flashlight, looking for a long branch and some short branches. I was careful to not stray too far. I had my compass with me, and I knew they were east, so I really couldn't get that lost. I eventually got a good handful of branches and sticks and started heading back. Thankfully, it was a dry night. The climate had a tendency to dry out as it got colder and get humid as it got warmer. This meant it rarely snowed, so we'd be dry, except really cold. I got close enough to the fire to where I could turn my flashlight off and got my branches back and dropped them into the community pile. It looked like we had enough to make it through the night and build a few shelters if we needed to. They'd already worked out the schedule by the time I got back. We were going to eat and then do 2 people on, 2 people off each observation post for 4-hour increments. The rest, such as the drivers, would get to sleep the whole time. As for sleeping arrangements, everyone got to sleep wherever they wanted. A few opted to sleep in the semi, since it had a sleeper cab. Others would sleep in the seats of the semi and van. 2 more could sleep comfortably in the van without it being too awkward. The rest opted to sleep in the shelters constructed outside because either they would have to rotate or felt like the vehicles would be bullet magnets. There was another guy that wanted to sleep by the fire, and there was room for me on the other side, so I volunteered for that. I would get up every few hours and keep the fire going, just enough to kick another log in. Everyone got done eating and threw the garbage in the fire. I went to go get another bundle of logs anyway. So I did. When I came back, everyone was either in their patrol group or had gone to bed. I set my sticks down next to me and gathered about half the pile and sat it next to me. I made sure there weren't any pokey sticks or rocks under me, and then I got some reflective blankets out of my pack and laid a reflective mylar sheet down on the ground. It was reflective and wouldn't let the cold get to me. I never got around to having a blanket in my bag. I guess I was really regretting that now. I grabbed a second mylar sheet and kept it folded up and set my pack down on the sheet so it wouldn't blow away, and I grabbed some sticks that were a few feet high apiece and twisted them quietly into the ground. I made sure they were forward of where I wanted to be, not too close to the fire but not too far away. Then I took the second mylar reflective sheet and fastened it to the sticks on each side. I opted to use medical tape because I knew it wouldn't destroy the sheets and would hold up all night. I only had to do a simple loop of tape around the mylar to fasten it to the stick, and it was fine. Then I ran the mylar back to where it would be behind me, so it ended up being sort of a V-shape lengthwise with me laying in the corner. I took my Kevlar gloves off and put them in my pack. I was laying on a reflective blanket and I had one above. I crawled inside carefully as to not rip or scrunch up the mylar and used my backpack as a pillow. The guy across from me had a sleeping bag and sleeping pad, so he was fine. It wasn't that I wasn't prepared. I was just used to camping out of a vehicle where I could carry a few more things. I made sure to turn my phone off after scrolling through my pictures. I fell asleep putting sticks in the fire, listening to the bugs. Nice and warm. Chapter 16. Time to get going. Pre-dawn. Day 2. By morning, the lookouts had switched several times. They helped me keep the fire going all night as they cycled through, which was nice. The rotating observers were very appreciative of the fire so they could get warmed up and slept by the fire briefly, wrapped up in emergency blankets themselves. As usual, I had to get up and go find a tree in the middle of the night. I didn't try to fight it. I got up and found a place to go. I brought some sticks back with me. We had a nice strong fire all night thanks to everyone's combined efforts. Before long, far-off birds woke me up, signaling the imminent dawn. Coffee was brewing, and breakfast was going. We would be putting the fire out soon, so the smoke couldn't be traced back to us. Someone went and pounded on the truck and van to wake everyone up for pre-dawn. I took my boots off, changed my socks, and put my boots back on. Carefully tucked my mylar sheets away into my pack as neatly as I could, and then pulled the sticks out of the ground. We weren't adding any more sticks to the fire so ashes wouldn't get in the food. As soon as the food was done, the trash would be tossed in, then the fire would be doused completely. I put my pack back on and went to find a tree, and when I came back, food and coffee were being handed out. I passed on the coffee, but accepted some food and water. They must have had food provisions with them in the truck, and, of course, using whatever we had left in the van. It seemed like a turkey sausage hash, and I had a huge serving. They'd made plenty for everyone. I thanked them for the food and ate my serving as fast as I could without choking. I drank all the water bottle down also and asked if they could spare another. They had several cases and obliged. I had a water filter in my pack, of course, but we were nowhere near a water supply. Nobody had discovered a water source in their scouting. I had a few spare water bottles in my pack, but you were supposed to always use your pack goods last. We were going to take the semi and van further east to draw them away. Our comms guy had been able to reach the comms guy from the main convoy over the system in the semi. The plan was still go, but as we were talking about it, and as the sky started to lighten in the horizon, gunfire erupted. We all stopped to listen, and the gunfire was several miles away to the north. We started frantically packing, and I looked over to see someone synchronizing our van and semi-startup so they would know we had two vehicles. He waved his hands over his head to make sure he had their attention, and then he held his hand out with a palm up. An arm popped out of each vehicle with a thumbs up. Then he put his fist out and arm straight and started twirling in a circle. Simultaneously, both vehicles started up and began to warm up. Everyone threw their remaining garbage in the fire, then quickly buried it in the dirt. We wouldn't spare any water. The smoke should dissipate before the sun can reflect off it, and the dirt will smother the flames and smoke. There was still no wind, which was nice, and meant that our food and coffee smells wouldn't lead them to our camp quickly either. Our comms guy couldn't raise the convoy on comms anymore, so we assumed they were too busy in their ambush operation. As we all packed up and started heading east up the logging road, we heard a secondary ambush begin southward. The road began to have a slight grade up in elevation, and the banks became heavily wooded again. Within a few minutes, the gunfire stopped in the distance, and up the slight grade we drove.